Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Esri. I'm a Global Account Manager in the Architecture, Engineering and Construction team. And today I'm delighted to be back as your host for the second instalment of the ArcGIS Update Summer Edition 2024. Now, in today's webinar, we will be taking a look at all the latest and greatest updates to make its way through to the ArcGIS system this quarter, giving you a chance to hear what's new, but most importantly, helping your teams and organisations start to plan for the future. Now, with me today, I'm joined by an incredible lineup of presenters, including our Chief Technical Officer, Mark Wells, and three of our fabulous GIS consultants, Alistair Hind, Claudia Hodgson, and James Finlay. So firstly, thank you team for joining me today. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what you have in store for us. But before we get started, we're going to kick things off with a bit of housekeeping. Now, if you do need to drop off at any point today, please do not worry. Today's session will be recorded, and a copy of the recording alongside the resources that we reference and a copy of the slides will be circulated in a follow-up email. Now, because today is full to the brim of lots of exciting updates, there will not be a live Q&A. However, we will still be capturing your questions and feedback on Slido. Please ensure that you log your questions with us, and if there's any that resonate with you, please make sure you upvote them, as the most upvoted questions will be addressed in our follow-up thread. Now, if you haven't used Slido before, you can simply scan the QR code on screen or navigate to slido.com and enter in the event code Esri 2006 to get started. Please keep an eye on Slido. At the end of today's webinar, you will notice that the poll section will become live, and that's a great section to submit your feedback in terms of how you found today's webinar, but also give us your thoughts as to what you'd like to see on the next quarterly update. Now, in terms of what's coming up today, we're going to kick things off with the headline news, a few short, sharp and sweet updates to be aware of this quarter. We'll then hear from Mark, who's going to give us his take on this quarter and what to keep an eye out for, before jumping into the bulk of the updates, where we'll explore the expanded access of the updated user types. We'll take a look at what's new in ArcGIS Pro 3.3, and we'll get to grips with ArcGIS Image for ArcGIS Online, and last but certainly not least, finish off with an overview of ArcGIS GeoBIM. So with that, let's get started with the headline news. And today, I'd like to start by talking about a couple of deprecation notices. So for those of you who have heard or may have used Community Analyst, which is a dedicated tool for policy planning and decision making, please take note that the final release of Community Analyst will be in October, and shortly after that in December, it will be retired. Now, if you are still looking to access and use similar capabilities, then do not fear, because as an alternative, we recommend looking at Business Analyst that offers similar functionality. If you do want to migrate any projects across from Community Analyst to Business Analyst, then we strongly recommend that you wait until after the 1st of December to do so. Similarly, ArcGIS Tracking Analyst, which is an extension for ArcMap, which sits under the ArcGIS Desktop Suite, is also being deprecated, and it's being brought in line with the retirement notice of Desktop, which will be retired in March 2026. Now, if you have any questions about the deprecation notices, please feel free to reach out to your account manager, and we'd be happy to address any questions that you might have on this. So moving on, let's take a look at what's new this quarter. And I'm going to start with ArcGIS Enterprise 11.3, which was released at the end of May. Now, it's important to note that this is a long-term supported release, and with it, we saw a whole host of new updates make its way through to the solution. So the first item is the updated Living Atlas content. For those of you using Enterprise already on a previous version, you currently do already have access to Living Atlas, but it's only a subcategory of the full catalogue that's available. However, at 11.3, administrators will now have the ability to frequently update the catalogue when and if desired. And you can do that through the administration settings on the main page of the portal. With this release, we also saw the introduction of new date and time fields following suit from the previous update of ArcGIS Online. You can now have certain fields like date only, time only, timestamp offset, and big integer. So for example, if you're working with birthdays, you might just want to use the date only field. At 11.3, there's more advanced functionality with custom analysis tools. Now, this isn't brand new, so for individuals who might have been previously publishing geoprocessing models and Python scripts and using them as services, you might be familiar with the fact that you could have consumed those services in Map Viewer Classic, Web App Builder, or custom apps. But at 11.3, those services can now be used in the new Map Viewer, and even better than that, the analysis widget in Experience Builder, really giving you flexibility in terms of out-of-the-box tools, but also extending that functionality. And for anybody looking to migrate to 11.3 anytime soon, please take note that there is a .NET 8 requirement. This is required for the Microsoft IIS web adapter, but also for the .NET-based server object extension and server object interceptors. Moving on to ArcGIS Indoors, we saw a few updates when it comes to capabilities within Pro. So we saw the introduction of a new tool called Immersive 360-degree photos. So if you're capturing 360-degree photographs, maybe using a mobile phone or sensors, you can take that imagery catalogue and you can include it in your indoor maps. And even better than that, you can publish it to your indoor viewer web app. Now, I think this functionality really lends itself quite nicely to a variety of different use cases. But just to name a few, you could use it for onboarding, site familiarization, even carrying out surveys remotely. And changing our focus slightly, we've also seen enhancements to CAD and BIM import when using it with ArcGIS Indoors in Pro. So it's now possible to import 3D features from IFC. There's support for importing linked models from Revit. Roofs can now be imported as levels, and there's support for importing multiple CAD files per level. Next, with ArcGIS Story Maps, we now support text selection media actions. So if you want to change the media in line with the text and the narrative, you can now do so at the click of a button. With this release, we saw greater support for more imagery types, which should allow you to bring in and encompass a variety of images and different formats. And when it comes to Story Maps briefings, which is a template within Story Maps, there is now support for Google and Adobe Analytics. So if you'd like to track how many hits your app is getting, this may be of interest for you. With briefings, you can also now add tables. So if you're working with numbers or statistics, it's a great way of visualizing your data. And there is support for coded elements. So again, if the out-of-the-box functionality doesn't quite meet your requirements and you want to tailor it slightly, you can do that using the coded elements. And last, but certainly not least in the headline news, like many of you today, we are eagerly anticipating the expected release of ArcGIS Online, which is due to drop on the 26th of June. Now, there's lots of exciting items on the roadmap that we can't wait to get our hands on. But today, I'd just like to highlight 4 the items of the roadmap that I'm particularly excited for. So the first is this idea of a recycling bin. So if you accidentally delete an item, yourself as the item owner or the administrator will have 14 days to retrieve that item before it's permanently removed. There's also the ArcGIS Web Editor, which is a new web editing application, which offered advanced editing capabilities above and beyond what you already have. There'll be enhancements to labeling and tables, so thinking about some of that extra functionality you have at a desktop level and bringing more of that functionality into a cloud-based environment. And finally, updated user types. Now, my colleagues today are going to pick up on some of the updates to the user types in just a moment. But for now, I'm going to draw the headline news to a close. And I'm going to hand you over to Mark, our Chief Technical Officer, to talk about some of the key changes this quarter. So Mark, over to you.
Unfortunately, Alicia, Mark's experiencing some trouble, so I'm gonna jump the queue and I'm gonna go ahead first. So let me just share my screen instead. Brilliant. So hopefully that's coming through okay. We're slightly tweaking the order a little bit here, but Mark hopefully will be joining us on the webinar to talk through exactly what these updated user types mean to you all. But essentially, this updated model really does make it far simpler and allows you to have far greater access to a wide range of products that we have in ArcGIS. So the purpose of my next 5-minute session is to kind of highlight just some of those products that you get expanded access to with these updated user types. But as I said, Mark will go into a little bit more exactly about those user types, hopefully a little later on. So first up, 2 of the products that we have expanded access to are ArcGIS Image for ArcGIS Online, which will be made available at a creator level and above, as well as ArcGIS GeoBIM, which will be made available at a contributor level and above. But 2 of my colleagues, Alistair and James, they're going to be demonstrating these products actually later on in this webinar to showcase the capabilities and what they're capable of. So let's go ahead and actually look at some other products first. Now, with the ArcGIS Online update scheduled to come next week, ArcGIS Excalibur is going to be made available to Creator, Professional, and Professional Plus user types. Now, Excalibur is an imagery product that's available with a base ArcGIS Enterprise 10.7 or above deployment, as well as an ArcGIS image server. But exactly what is ArcGIS Excalibur? Well, it's a web-based imagery and video analysis software for working with maps, images, and video services. And it does this through 4 core capabilities. Firstly, through accessing content. So as I mentioned, it's a web-based application, so you can easily access web-enabled services, but as well as video-based services too. So with all of that imagery hosted in ArcGIS, Excalibur can actually enable you to query thousands of images based on its metadata. And you can see that on this example that we've got on screen here. So you can actually set search criteria such as area of interest, perhaps, cloud cover, capture data, to be able to find the best imagery in your catalogue to suit your needs. And traditionally, this is something analysts would have to sift through thousands of images, manually inspecting each one of them. So it's a way of massively simplifying and speeding up that process. And you can see that happening on screen at the moment. Another one is organizing projects. So Excalibur is a project-based application. So you can bring in all of your necessary imagery, all of your foundational GIS data into the one workspace. And you can even set things as well, like set analyst instructions. So you can set out exactly what the project's for, exactly what you want the analyst to actually do with that project. So it supports that kind of collaborative working as well. Of course, you might expect analysis tools, and Excalibur definitely has plenty of these. There's a wide range of comparison tools for your imagery, such as swiping between different images, detecting change, as well as some of those more typical ones you might expect, like markup annotations or measurement tools. And then, of course, it's a ArcGIS product, so it means all of your data and your projects are stored in ArcGIS, and you can then feed it into other applications to be able to share your outputs and your results with others, such as maybe using an ArcGIS dashboard, for example. So if you are already working with imagery, maybe or video services, or perhaps kind of considering your options, I definitely recommend checking out Excalibur, especially with this broadened access that will become available next week. ArcGIS Data Pipelines is a data integration and preparation app, which is going to be made available in ArcGIS Online to users, again, at a creator level or above. But what actually is ArcGIS Data Pipelines, for those of you who haven't heard of it? Well, it allows you to connect to and process data from various different sources. So some of you might be thinking this is something I can do already using things like notebooks or Python, but this opens up the capability to a far broader audience because it's got the kind of intuitive model builder style format you can see on screen, and it also has a drag and drop style interface to make it easy to build your data pipelines. And on screen, you can see this is what a simple kind of data pipeline may look like, and it consists of your input for connecting to the desired data source. You've got a processing tool or maybe a series of processing tools, and you've got an output in the form of a feature layer in ArcGIS Online. But maybe you're thinking this, and well, why would I want to use this over traditional methods? Well, ultimately, the big deal with data pipelines is it allows you to connect to cloud data stores. Also, as I mentioned, it's a no-code environment, so you can actually bring together quite complex processes and simply visualize it in that model builder style format, making it easier for users to pick up regardless of their experience, then kind of enabling you to have greater collaboration with your users as well. Another key point is that it allows you to automate your data processing workflows. So each time you create a data pipeline, you can save it and rerun it whenever you need to perform that same process again. And then lastly, if none of that has tempted you, you can also even schedule data pipelines through the data pipelines tasks. Next up, we have ArcGIS City Engine. Now, this is a desktop application which will be made available at a professional plus licensing level. And at a very high level, ArcGIS City Engine is all about being able to create urban environments at scale. So rather than having to model each individual building of a city, you can actually do this at scale by using defined scripted rules. So you can define rules for maybe different elements of a building in your 3D environment, and it then applies it at huge scales, and enabling you to rapidly adjust a huge amount of features at once. Just a couple of common use cases that we've seen with ArcGIS City Engine include urban planning, design and development, entertainment, and for those who have actually seen the 2016 Disney animation Zootopia, you may not have known when you were watching that City Engine was actually responsible for creating urban districts within that film, which is a pretty cool fact to know. But as well as that, we've also got real world simulation and even used in academia as well. And these are just to name a few of the use cases. But if you do like the sound of ArcGIS City Engine, something to be aware of is it does require that scripting experience, as I mentioned, and it does have a bit of a unique scripting language. So that's something to be aware of when looking into ArcGIS City Engine. And then lastly, we have ArcGIS Pro. Now, with the upcoming update, Pro is going to be made available to users at a licensing level of creator and above. This will enable creators to have access to ArcGIS Pro Basic. Professional users will have access to ArcGIS Pro Standard, and Professional Plus comes with the additional Pro extensions. Now, this actually leads on to my second section, which is looking into what's new in ArcGIS Pro 3.3. Now on screen, this, as with most Pro releases, it's not a small one. There's plenty that we could talk through today. These are all of the kind of key things that have come with Pro 3.3, not just being kind of new capabilities that you might have wanted to see, but as well as that productivity and performance enhancements as well. So we're going to spend the next 10 minutes or so just looking through some of these highlights to Pro 3.3. And we're going to start with the improved visualization options. Now, visualizations, they really are kind of becoming more and more impressive with every release. And when it comes to data visualization, this release brings not only just a fantastic 3D modeling tools, but it's important to actually step back and have a look at some of the more simpler enhancements as well. And you can see here, you can actually now classify categorical data with unique value symbology by specifying a size variable or a color variable to combine multiple visualization techniques. Now, this is very similar to the quantity by category symbology option that you may have been familiar with if you've moved from ArcMap or have used ArcMap in the past. So just to bring that to life, an example could be, say you've got a layer of point features representing different types of power plants, for example. You can then classify those plants by type, but then also use symbol size to show power capacity. Now, this allows you to see the variance in capacity by plant type, and then note as well the legend can show one size or color variation, or the size of color variation for each unique symbol class. But let's dive into what's possible with the new flood simulation workflow that I mentioned, which for me is a standout for this release. So you can now perform dynamic flood modeling in 3D views. It allows you to actually define an area of interest. You can set the parameters and then run this scenario. So shallow water equations can be used to calculate where water flows and accumulates for each scenario, and you can then is stored in a simulation layer in the scene. And each can contain kind of additional elements as well. So you can have channels, water source points, barriers, and you can try different parameters to compare what if scenarios and test mitigation plans as well. You can also symbolize the water by depth or by flow rate and load initial water to the scene as well. And you can even contain your water within an area of interest as well. The results can also be exported as raster data for additional workflows, such as maybe sharing to maps, making temporal profile graphs, and visualizing results as well. But of course, visualizations don't just have to be maps. There have been many enhancements to charts as well in Pro 3.3. Bar charts now have the option to treat null as a category. You can change the label on data tabs and change the symbology on the series tab. We've even got new trend line options have been added to scatter plots for better fits to data. And lastly, if you're using graduated colors or unique value symbology, you can now generate a bar chart based on the layer symbology properties, which also includes labels. There's also a brand new tool actually for charts as well, the time series cross correlation. Now that actually, it calculates the cross correlation at various time lags between two time series stored in a space-time cube. Now that's an awful lot of words, so we're going to try and break it down a little bit more. So let's take a closer look at these graphs. Now this tool compares the two time series at each location of a space-time cube, and it calculates the correlation between them. So when one time series increases, we want to know if the other one then tends to increase, decrease, or not change significantly. So the tool also estimates kind of delayed effects called time lags between the two variables, such as maybe delay between the start of a marketing campaign and an increase in sales revenue, for example. Another example would be COVID-19. In the data, you can see there is a strong positive correlation between counts of COVID cases and counts of COVID deaths. We can also see that COVID death lagged behind COVID diagnosis by 1 or 2 weeks in most states. And the output features included in the time series charts in their pop-ups allow you to see how the two time series align for various time lags. You can also see the original values of the time series or view them after they've been filtered to remove general trends as well. And by viewing the results on a map like this, the tool can reveal spatial patterns and connections between the time series. And as we've seen already, kind of data is the driver of our maps and our charts. And with Pro 3.3, you can bring in even more useful formats to Pro. PDFs are now supported as raster layers. So when adding a PDF to the map, there are options such as which page do you want to display, the resolution and DPI, which is optional, as well as the color mode. And then once that layer is added, you can interact with it like any other raster layer. So for example, on the imagery tab, I could click georeference the layer so that the features match up with my base map. I can then also save it with the PDF or as a new image, and also it supports protected PDFs as well. But of course, what really is the point of having lots of great inputs and visualizations if you don't have the outputs that you need? And well, the good news is in Pro 3.2, so the previous release, we introduced the ability to create a report of your geodatabase schema with the Generate Schema report. But in response to feedback on Esri Community, Pro 3.3 release introduces the new Convert Schema Report geoprocessing tool to allow you to convert the output. So you can reorder fields, you can align spatial references, you can assign domain values and a lot more as well. But then you can then take those schema changes and incorporate them into a new geodatabase. And Esri has also responded to the highly asked for Esri community idea for batch exporting attachments. And the ArcGIS Pro team have actually built an export attachments geoprocessing tool. Now, this tool allows you to export all attachments with their original file names to an output folder. Optionally, exported attachments can be grouped together into subdirectories using a subdirectory field. And to rename exported attachments, you can choose an option from the name format drop-down menu and choose field value options to replace those original field names as well. But bringing your project together and organizing your outputs really helps to kind of communicate the story of what you've been doing in ArcGIS Pro. And a subtle but I think really useful enhancement is now available in layouts with the ability to add hyperlinks. For example, you may like to add a link to the ArcGIS Online page where you got the map data from. So you can now actually paste the URL directly into and a hyperlink will automatically be created. Hovering over the link, you can see the full URL, which is a great security feature. And note that also hyperlinks are also preserved when exporting the PDFs. Alongside layouts though, presentations are also a new addition to the Pro projects item list. Now these provide pages that you can customize to display your maps in full screen. So there are 4 different types you can see there: maps, blank, image, and video pages, and presentations are managed in the catalog like other project items. All pages can have additional text, images, shapes added to build the story and highlight key aspects. And like in layouts, presentations also allow you to activate a map page and make new pages from it by clicking the Insert New Page button. And you can also even control layer visibility and save those changes as well. You can even add interest as well, adding transition effects to customize the experience as you move between those different pages. And in full screen, you can actually explore those map pages as well as view pop-up information for your features as well. Finally, you can also share the presentation as a PDF, a video, or images for each page. So at the beginning, I mentioned it's not just the capabilities, but it's also the performance and the productivity that has been enhanced in 3.3. And I won't read into all of these, but you can see just some here of the highlights to help you make work faster and smarter using ArcGIS Pro. And you can read more about this in the Pro documentation that we'll have linked in the follow-up email. One last thing to note as well with Pro 3.3, before you head over and update or install 3.3, it's important to make sure you have the correct version of Microsoft.NET installed. So that's before trying to install or update Pro 3.3. There may also be some additional requirements depending on your computer setup. So again, please do head to the ArcGIS Pro documentation page before installing or updating to this release. But that's everything from me, so I'll now hand over back to Alicia.
Thank you, Claudia. Quite possibly a very difficult task to find my favourite feature that I'm looking forward to, but I think if I can pick one thing out, it's the amount of ideas or ArcGIS ideas that have come through to fruition. So I'm sure there's something in there for everybody, whether it's the changes in the named user types or looking at the new functionality in ArcGIS Pro. So before we move on, just a quick reminder, if you haven't already done so, please make sure you log on to Slido, and if any questions pop into your mind or any resonate with you already on the list, please make sure you upvote them. Once more, the most upvoted questions will be addressed in our follow-up email. Okay, with that, I'd now like to hand it over to Alistair, who's going to tell us a little bit more about ArcGIS Image for ArcGIS Online. Alistair.
Thank you, Alicia, and hopefully everybody can hear me okay. We have had some gremlins affecting this webinar, so let's crack on. So ArcGIS Image for ArcGIS Online is a really exciting capability. Imagery is one of those things that particularly high resolution imagery can bring so much information and insight for us. But it can be a little bit expensive to acquire, whether you're getting it from a third party or going and collecting your own with something like a drone. There's an investment in getting that data, and traditionally, it was a little bit locked away, either in desktops or kind of only available through Enterprise. So the move of bringing imagery into online was really exciting, because it starts to open that up to wider use and starts to unlock that really powerful information. And the change now with the extending access to more organizations is only going to help with that. So I just want to use the few minutes that I've got to give you a very kind of quick overview of some of the different capabilities within online. So, as I say, some of it's about unlocking that information and making it accessible. So it's not just a kind of niche source of information. And there's different capabilities there around being able to host imagery, share that out to different users within your organization, and also a set of tools for analyzing imagery, and I'm going to touch on each of those. It's worth bearing in mind there'll be slight differences between the capabilities that are available to the different user types for the imagery, and that's something that will be more information on nearer the time. The other thing to remember with image layers and analysis is both the hosting of image layers, like any other data in online, does consume some credits, and because imagery is a relatively dense data set for a kind of defined geographic area, because it's particularly high resolution, because it's determined by the pixel size, it can be a little bit I suppose a slightly higher credit use than some of the layers that you've worked with previously. So that's one of the things to watch for. Make sure you make use of the credit budgets. And the other is that the analysis tools, they're really powerful, but they will use a few credits as well. So I'm going to jump over into ArcGIS Online and give you a quick look at some of those capabilities. So the first thing I want to do is look at that scenario where you have some imagery and you want to load that up and make it available to your users as a really powerful piece of context. So I'm going to create a tiled imagery layer, and I've downloaded the sample TIFFs from Ordnance Survey for their master map imagery. Because it comes with 4 images, I'm going to create a mosaic data set, and I will just pick up the TIFF files here and set those off loading, and you'll see that it's, I've only managed to pick 2 of them. Let me just, we'll run with 2, it'll work for this. I obviously didn't quite click 2 of them. So you'll see that it's uploading those. While it's doing that, the other thing that I need to remember to go in and do is to change the coordinate system. So it will default to Web Mercator, but we can go in and find our national grid. I scroll down to the United Kingdom, British National Grid, and if I want to, I can also specify the transformation that I want to use in case I'm mixing coordinate systems. So I've set that to OSGB, the number 7 one. So if I apply that, and that's our images uploaded, I'll go ahead, fill in the information. Obviously, if this was for real, I'd also fill in tags and things, but in the interest of time, we will just pop in 11:35 as the time just now, and then hit create. So it's uploaded the images, and it's going to take a little bit of time to go off and work on that and create that tiled layer for me. So just to keep things moving along, I am going to jump over to a copy that I loaded before. And I'm going to open this up in the map viewer, and we'll see that we have high resolution imagery for the center of Exeter. So the next thing I want to do is show how you could make use of this for setting it up as context for your end users. So I'm going to change my base map to imagery. So we've now got 2 sets of imagery. We've got the global imagery layer, which covers everywhere, And then for the area that we've got the high resolution imagery, we've now got that as well. So if we add in another layer, so I'm going to go to the Living Atlas and I'm going to add in some business data. So I'm borrowing the heritage list data for England. So we should now see that overlaid on top of our high resolution imagery. So if we zoom in, you can see once it's drawn, you can see how detailed this is, particularly if I scroll down to the boundary with the world imagery. And they're a little bit hard to make out, but you can just about see the kind of black triangles there of our data overlaid. So the other thing that I'm going to do, if you're looking at kind of sharing this on and wanting to make this act as a base map, the other thing that you can then do is, if we go back to our layers view, is I can go into my imagery and move that into the base map. So our base map now has two layers. It has the OS imagery that I've loaded, the high resolution, and the world imagery. And that means that if I save this map, and we'll give it a simple name and save that. If I now share this map through one of our apps, and we're going to go for an instant app, and I'm just going to use the basic one, and we'll just use preview mode. Because I've moved that imagery into the base map, it now means that as an end user, I will have access to both sets of imagery. So I won't fall off the edge of the kind of base map, but I do have access to the high resolution imagery where it's available. But you'll see that in the layers list, that's not showing as a map layer. So as an end user, it's become a seamless base map that has those two different levels of resolution. So that's just a really quick introduction to loading imagery and being able to share that on with a wider set of users. So that was some aerial imagery. The other thing that I wanted to talk about briefly before moving on to analysis was multispectral imagery. So this is Sentinel-2 data from the Living Atlas, and it's for the peninsula near, we're looking at the peninsula near Reykjavik, where there's been the recent volcanoes, recent volcanic eruptions. And we're going to make use of the processing templates. So at the moment, we're looking at natural color, and there's not a huge amount of information coming through from that. But because this is multispectral imagery, we can make use of the different processing templates. Color infrared with DRA gives kind of a different view, and that's a good one for looking at vegetation. The one that I'm going to use for this is the shortwave infrared with DRA. The DRA bit just stands for dynamic range adjustment, and that means that it will make use of the full range of colors for the data that's on your current screen. These take a couple of minutes to apply, so that should be doing its thing. It's running a little bit slowly. Let's see if if I switch to my pre-prepared ones. So with these, you can see this is some older data, and you can see the extent of the lava and the kind of current hotspots in the eruption. And then I picked one from last week, and when that loads in, you'll see around here the lava extent has expanded, and you can see how active it was at the time. There's much more of a hotspot there. We've got a map gallery with some of these images in if you want to kind of follow through to that, and you can understand a bit more about how those multispectral processing templates work. And it also talks about the image collection explorer, which for something like Sentinel, where we've got a whole range of images available for different areas and at different dates, it helps you choose the ones for the area that you're interested in and with the characteristics that you're looking for. So the next thing that we're going to do is very briefly dip into analysis. So sometimes when you want to try something out, you don't always have access to the data that will allow you to try some of the capabilities. Things like our Learn lessons are really great for that, because not only does it give you a tutorial that takes you through something that's new for you, they typically include the data. So this is an example looking at damage from a hailstorm to crops, and it comes with access to the imagery that you need, and then takes you through the steps for doing that. So I worked through this last week, and you'll see this is the before and after imagery that's the basis for it. So if I just switch that one off, you can see once the storm's gone through, you can actually see the hail lying on the ground in these areas. And so this tutorial is using the analysis tools to analyze and look at the differences between the two images as a way of classifying the damage to the crops. So it's making use of these raster functions. So these are accessible through the analysis tab. You can go into the raster functions, find the one that you're interested in. So the first step makes use of band arithmetic, and this allows you to do a comparison between the two images, and then it takes you on through from that to do a compute change, which looks at the differences and then also remaps those. And you can see from the history what you've worked through, and if you want to go back and check any of the steps or rerun them, you can reopen them with the parameters that you used for it. And then in this tutorial, ultimately what it does is brings in a field boundary layer, having computed the change, and then picks that up and carries it through using a join. So you end up with, if I just switch these ones back off, a map that is polygon data that's had the characteristics, the difference, the calculated difference between the two images carried through onto it, so you can assess which of your fields have been most badly damaged. So that's a nice example, taking you through some of those different raster tools and allowing you to look at the differences between two images and systematically analyze them. So again, yeah, if you want to try some of these things out, it's a good way to get started. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Alicia.
Thank you, Alistair. Again, it's really interesting to see just how far technology has come, being able to do some of those tools, some of those functionality with imagery in the cloud. It's incredible. So with that, I'd now like to hand you over to James, and James is going to give us an overview of GeoBIM. So James, over to you.
Thank you, Alicia. So yeah, we'll be taking a look at ArcGIS GeoBIM, which was born out of a partnership between Autodesk and Esri, which brings together the spatial capabilities from ArcGIS with the rich BIM world from Autodesk Construction Cloud and BIM 360. So thinking about a way of bringing together the powerful world of GIS with the rich content from the world of BIM. If you're new to the world of BIM, it refers to building information modeling. It's a process which allows us to understand, visualize, and interrogate detailed information about built assets, whether that's through detailed building plans, CAD drawings and models, or just looking at the project design and maintenance documents. What GIS adds to BIM is an understanding of the spatial context that surrounds our rich content from the BIM world, whether that comes from the built or the natural environment. What's important about bringing these two things together is it allows project stakeholders and designers to understand the context around where their plans and their rich content from BIM sits. By adding these two worlds together, we can supply the landscape, city, or network information models to supplement our plans, designs, and project information from our BIM data. So whether you're in the process of planning a new bridge, in the middle of a large construction project, or managing the kind of connected and intertwined infrastructure that sits beneath the city, bringing together GIS and BIM is an important step to understanding you have the clearest picture of your data in the context that it sits. But before I dive into GeoBIM specifically, I wanted to touch upon the ways that you can already use BIM data within ArcGIS, even in advance of the new ArcGIS Online update. So as you see on the screen, ArcGIS natively supports BIM, so you can work with industry standard formats like Revit and IFC files, as well as CAD drawings within both ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Online. So whether you need to manage, convert, clean, and edit your CAD and BIM data, or create nice applications for your end users through web scenes and web apps, you have the ability to do this already in the system. So whether that's georeferencing your CAD layers, converting them into a file geodata in ArcGIS Pro, or understanding how a new library might look within your cityscape, you can start building these apps and engaging your end users using the tools within our system. In addition, we already have tools that allow you to bring in information from BIM into ArcGIS Pro, as well as tools that allow you to bring in information from ArcGIS Online and your portal into your AutoCAD and Autodesk desktop software via the Autodesk connectors for ArcGIS. So essentially what this means is that you can access your rich BIM content through a BIM 360 cloud connection in ArcGIS Pro, as well as access all of your ArcGIS Online layers within your Autodesk, InfraWorks, AutoCAD, and Civil 3D projects. So if you see on the left, you can see some of the spatial information from ArcGIS Online, such as base maps, rich GIS data, being pulled into Autodesk projects to allow you to understand the spatial context where things sit. However, on the right, you can see information such as CAD drawings or a Revit file being added into ArcGIS Pro via BIM cloud connection. These are nice for your desktop professionals, your civil engineers, your GIS managers, GIS analysts, to be able to collaborate across teams while still doing the rich, detailed data design work in the desktop software. So now you might be asking, what's special about GeoBIM? What makes it different than these other tools that we have? Well, in particular, what it does is it creates a cloud-to-cloud connection between Autodesk Construction Cloud and BIM 360 with ArcGIS Online and Enterprise portals through the ArcGIS GeoBIM app. And in particular, what it's useful for is people who need to sit in between these two worlds, such as key stakeholders, directors, or project managers that need to understand the spatial context in which projects sit and start making decisions to understand planning, any issues that impact construction, and then be able to collaborate across the teams and make decisions. So what ArcGIS GeoBIM does is it links ArcGIS features in ArcGIS Online to your records and project documentation in your Autodesk cloud. This allows you to do some integrated visualization, querying, and project reporting by creating focused GeoBIM apps, which allow you to see your GIS data and your BIM data side by side in a web browser. So let's take a look at what this might look like. Here we are inside a GeoBIM app. If you see, we're in a standard kind of map view that we might expect in ArcGIS Online. We also have information such as our BIM projects, issues, and documents, which we can pull from to start to understand how these two things link together. In addition, on the right, we have a catalog, which includes all of the project files and plans that we might have from our connection into Autodesk Construction Cloud. If I look at an existing document, such as our Golders Green CAD document, I can pull it up in the right-hand side to take a look at the CAD drawing directly within ArcGIS Online. Here, if we zoom in, we can see we have the detailed CAD drawing. What's important is that I can see this spatially by displaying where its location is on the map. Here I can see the footprint of that CAD drawing, and I can start to understand exactly where Golders Green sits within the spatial context around it. However, I don't just have to stop there with my visualization. What I can also do is jump over to a 3D mesh. Here we see a nice 3D mesh of Golders Green Depot, and we can see all of the information that we previously had, such as where the CAD drawing is, and any other drawings such as this signal box down here. What we may also want to do is start linking up our Autodesk documents, such as instruction manuals, Revit files, and more, directly within the 3D objects within our map. Here I'm going to click on this signal, and I see that I already have this signal pole file that's attached to this 3D object in my scene. However, I know that we've added a new manual for users to understand how it operates. What I can do using this Add Links feature is I can go over here, browse through my signal documents, and pull up a preview of our maintenance manual. Here we can see we have this nice lightweight signal maintenance manual. And what I want to do is always attach it spatially to its location in the world. So I'll go ahead and link that into our existing point. So these will always be there for anybody who wants to access that project in the future. I can also delete or add more links as necessary. So that's maybe one of the first things that you want to start doing when you're within the world of GeoBIM. What I also want to show you is how we can access things such as rich Revit files within the GeoBIM app. So here, let's jump over to Aylesbury University to take a look at what a Revit file might look like inside this program. Here we have the 3D container for our Aylesbury University Revit file. And if I pull up the full Revit file on the right, we see that we have a bit more information and a bit richer detail than we have just in our ArcGIS Online web scene. What I can use is the web scene itself to start to interrogate and understand both the spatial context and the building itself. So what I might want to do is turn on the layers here and start to understand whether my proposed university construction is at risk from any flooding from rivers and seas. So I can turn on that layer, and as it renders, let's take a look at the building itself. I have access to lots of the 3D toolbox tools that you might be used to inside Experience Builder or web scenes, including the Building Explorer. If I select Aylesbury University here, what we can see is I can turn on and off different parts of the constituent Revit file, as well as browse between different levels of the building, such as going down to level 2, up to level 3, or seeing all of it at once. In particular, what I want to look at is the mechanical aspects of the building. If I select this at the very top, what we can see is we have an air handler. And what's important is that it has a specific spec sheet. So if we're going to be constructing or doing ongoing maintenance to this university building, we want to always be sure that we understand any specific requirements that we have for both installation and maintenance. By attaching this spatially within the GeoBIM app, we have a way of always visualizing that in a nice, neat way, and always attaching that document to its location in the real world. Here we can see that our risk of flooding from rivers and seas has just been pulled into our map. So what we might want to do in a GeoBIM app is allow users to create new issues, such as understanding whether or not there might be flooding that impacts the current site. However, if I turn on the existing issues, we can see that some have been reported already. So what I could do is I could pull those into a simple dashboard with a few different charts that help us understand which of these issues are open, ready to be inspected, or completely voided because we've decided that they're no longer needed. These are just a few ways you can start adding together the information from BIM with the world of ArcGIS. When you make an issue here in this web map, such as saying that there's a risk of flooding, this will feed into your Autodesk Construction Cloud, allowing other people to access that and understand that there are issues affecting construction. And this was all powered by bringing together the spatial context with your rich content from BIM. So if we just jump back here to think about the key benefits of GeoBIM, the first important one is just thinking about your project spatially, allowing you to access the most important information about your projects between teams in simple to use web apps, but most importantly, avoiding the data conversion that it normally takes to take GIS data and bring it into CAD world and vice versa. By using GeoBIM, you're actually accessing both cloud data sets side by side without the need for data conversion. So whether you're monitoring an ongoing construction project or starting the initial planning phases to understand the viability of a possible project, GeoBIM can support all of these common workflows. You don't need to remember these all because we'll send these across after the end of the webinar, but just know that GeoBIM supports this integrated visualization side by side. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Alicia.
Thank you, James. Incredible stuff. I know many of you out there have already started to explore GeoBIM, but again, with the named user changes, I'm excited to hear the feedback, your thoughts, and how you find it. So with that, I think we now have him back. Mark, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me all right?
I can.
So I am going to just share my screen. Is that coming through?
It is.
Okay, good stuff. Thanks very much, Alicia. Hello and good morning, everybody. Thanks for bearing with me whilst I had some of those issues. Let me just turn my camera on as well. There we are. So I just want to finish up the session today it's very exciting here at Esri. We are putting the finishing touches to the June ArcGIS Online update, which also sees the launch of the new ArcGIS User Types, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. I've been looking at the questions coming in on Slido, and hopefully I can answer some of those as we go through. But just before we get to that, I just want to draw your attention to a browser update which is going to affect ArcGIS Enterprise customers. So this is hot off the press in the last few days. In July next month, Google and Microsoft are going to be making some changes to their Chrome and Edge browsers, which is going to affect ArcGIS Enterprise users. So what's happening here is that Edge and Chrome are deprecating some functionality in version 1.2.7 of their browsers, which is released next month. And that's going to cause some problems in the display and rendering of the menus of the ArcGIS Enterprise portal. So instead of looking like this, it's going to look like this. Now, to fix this, we're going to be releasing some patches. Just to confirm, ArcGIS Online is not affected, so you don't need to worry if you're an online user. And also, the latest version of Enterprise, 11.3, is also not affected. But all other versions of Enterprise will be affected. So there's a table here to help break that down. So if you're running Enterprise 11.2 or prior, then you will need to patch or upgrade. Now, we'll share the links to this article as part of the resources so that you can keep an eye on this. Patches are going to be available for all versions that are released in general availability and also for extended support releases. There's a table here. This table here breaks all of that down. Those patches aren't available yet, so just do keep an eye on this article because it will be updated when they are available. So really the call to action here is that if you're running 11.2 Enterprise or earlier, you're going to need to apply a patch or upgrade. So keep an eye out to see the release of those. If you're running a version of Enterprise which is in the mature phase of support or that's no longer in support, then you are going to need to plan to upgrade. Now, I know that upgrading in a short timescale for lots of organizations is challenging. I realize that. So there are a couple of workarounds that you can look at in the short term. The first one is, actually there's details of it down here. The first one is to apply an enterprise policy setting. So you can ask your IT team to use an enterprise policy to suppress the change, and that will work until release 1.3.5 of these browsers. Now, I don't know exactly when Microsoft and Google are going to release 1.3.5, but what we can see is they tend to release a major version every month. And so if we're going to hit 1.2.7 in July, it's a fair guess that we're going to see 1.3.5 around about March, April next year. So that gives us about 8-9 months in order to respond. That will buy you some time. Just be aware that that's not a permanent fix. Now, the other thing that you could do is you could use a browser that's not based on Chromium. So this issue is actually coming about because of the change in an underlying open source browser component called Chromium that is used by Edge and is used by Chrome. Now, there are some other supported browsers like Firefox, for example, which don't use Chromium and therefore should be unaffected. So like I say, we'll circulate this article. It's got all of the information that you need. Do read it. If you've got questions, please reach out to us, talk to the support team or to your customer success manager. Okay, so onto the main news of the day then. The other thing I really wanted to highlight is about the ArcGIS User Types, which I can see there's a lot of chat about in Slido already, which is great. That is happening later this month. Now, I saw a question from Lydia and one or two others about, when exactly is it happening? When does my license switch over? What does that look like? This release will happen next week on June the 26th, but it will be updated overnight. So in the UK, we'll see that change on June the 27th. That's a week today, next Thursday. So what are we doing? Well, at Esri, we recognize that licensing ArcGIS can be complex and it can be difficult to get your head around. There are lots of different components, there are lots of different applications and approaches to licensing them. And we've been working hard to improve that. So next week, we're going to be simplifying our named user licensing model to make it easier to understand and also to give you access to more applications and more capabilities at each level. So rather than having the 7 user types that we have today, with lots of add-ons and extensions and options on top of that, what we're doing is we're simplifying that to 6 user types that you can see on the screen here. And then we're wrapping in many of those apps, those capabilities, add-ons and extensions for you as standard. And I saw some questions about this as well. So, I saw a question from Paul about why are we doing this? Is it a commercial decision? Actually, it's not a commercial decision. You know, this is about expanding the number of apps and capabilities that you have access to and simplifying how you get access to that. In fact, the main reason that we're doing this is in response to your feedback as a community. When I work with organizations, one of the most common pieces of feedback I hear is that you experience complexity and confusion in how different parts of the ArcGIS system are licensed. And we really want to make that easier. So thank you for working with us on this, because you've really helped to shape and influence the direction of some of these changes. Now, if you want to find out exactly what is happening and what you're going to get access to at each level, again, that's some of the questions that I saw coming through were about that. Then have a look on our website. You can just go to esriuk.com and scroll down here to the first blue tab on the left-hand side, click on that panel and give this section a read, introducing updated user types for ArcGIS. All the information that you need is in here. And actually, once you've done that, if you scroll right down to the bottom, there is a comparison matrix. It's really useful. It describes all of the transition with all of the new apps and capabilities that are wrapped in at each level. So let me just make that a little bit bigger for you here. Everything that's marked in green here is in addition to what you have today. So for example, one of the other questions that I saw on Slido, is the new creator license equivalent to the previous Pro Basic user type? And if not, what are the differences? Well, actually, the new creator user type does have all of the capabilities of the previous Pro Basic user type, yes, but it also has all of these additional things as well. So there's lots more to take advantage of in there too. And let me just reassure you, one of the most common questions that I get when I take people through this is, but what are you taking away? What are you removing? Nothing. You've got access to everything that you have today at every user type, and then these things on top. So there's nothing that's going away at the same time. The way I like to think about all of this is we're moving from a time that we licensed individual products, and we're moving to a time now where we're enabling you as individuals to operate within different roles. And if you have one of these roles, then that gives you access to a set of capabilities to support your work. And those capabilities are delivered through a broader group of apps that you now have access to as part of that role. And the wider context here, what we're seeing is the nature of professional GIS is changing. You know, no longer is it about one person using a monolithic application to do everything, but instead it's about having access to apps and capabilities that are designed and targeted to support specific types of work, enabling individuals, you know, to perform that work in the office, in the field, using mobile devices, using SaaS or self-hosted software, you know, online or on premises, whatever is appropriate for that type of work. And that really is our continued vision for ArcGIS. That's how we're actively developing it as a system that supports different types of work and facilitates collaboration and sharing between those people in those different roles. Now, you don't need to do anything to benefit from these changes. Like I said, next week, ArcGIS Online will be updated and you will automatically get access to these new user types and capabilities. And in parallel, what we're also doing is we're working on implementing these changes in ArcGIS Enterprise for ArcGIS Enterprise users. Now, that's going to come at the next release of ArcGIS Enterprise 11.4, which is going to happen later this year. So look out for that. Now, I spoke about the nature of professional GIS changing, and one final thing to draw your attention to is that ArcGIS Desktop is now in mature support as of March this year. Alicia mentioned this in some of her opening information earlier. So it's going to retire in less than 2 years now. And what mature support means for you today is that you can still call support, you can still ask us questions, get advice and guidance, but we are no longer actively developing, patching or hotfixing ArcGIS Desktop in response to issues arising. So I really want to encourage you and urge you, and I know many of you are doing this already, and lots of you have actually already migrated, but if you haven't and you're still using ArcMap, let me urge you to start that migration to modern ways of working. You know, using ArcGIS Online and some of the targeted apps and approaches through WebGIS that I've spoken about and that you've actually seen in action today, or using ArcGIS Pro if that's the most appropriate tool set for you as well. Now, to do this, if you're not already licensing by user type, you'll need to migrate to this user and role-based approach. And with the improvements that we're making to user types, I think this is a great time to do that. Don't wait until you can no longer maintain your ArcGIS Desktop licenses in a couple of years' time. The transition period is now. Talk to your customer success manager about how to transition onto these modern approaches, take advantage of WebGIS and ArcGIS Pro, and remove that risk of running legacy software that is no longer being patched and updated. And look, if you need help and guidance with this, please reach out to us. We really want to help make this transition as smoothly as possible. So I hope that's useful. The three key points: look out for the browser change, which is going to affect our ArcGIS Enterprise users. The user type information is all on the website. Do go and check that out. And finally, if you're still using ArcGIS Desktop, do look at a migration plan and talk to us about that. And with that, Alicia, back to you.
Thank you, Mark. So all that's really left to say is if you're looking forward to another webinar, you won't have to wait long until we're back together. So our next webinar will be hosted on the 25th of July, where we'll be focusing in on integrating ArcGIS Pro in your WebGIS workflows. So please keep an eye out for that. If you would like to tune in, make sure you register. So finally, all I'd like to say is a big thank you to our presenters today. And if you haven't already done so, please make sure you log and upvote your questions on Slido, and also take a look at the poll, which is now live. We'd love to hear your feedback. We want to know your thoughts, and most importantly, what you'd like to see in the next quarterly update. So with that, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.